Do you want to know how to create good, simple consequences that work? It is possible. I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, and how to create strong relationships. And in this video, I'm talking about consequences. In this video, we're going to talk about why consequences are important, what makes a bad consequence, what makes a good consequence, and how to make good, simple consequences for your family. So why are consequences important? Because they teach cause and effect. So this channel is called the Teaching Self-Government channel, and we focus on teaching parents and children how to create an environment where everyone learns self-government or self-regulation. Self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation and possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So you have to understand cause and effect. It's actually consequences that teach somebody cause and effect. Also, good teaching moments that are heart to heart really hit the heart. Now, when a person learns self-government, hopefully they are having a change of heart and not just a change of behavior. But they need to decide that it's healthy and comfortable to examine their own behavior and to make adjustments. Remember, the second part of that definition is possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. This means that we need to be utilizing positive consequences and negative consequences. So positive and negative consequences are both great teachers. They're both usually synthetic, but sometimes natural consequences can be utilized as well. A lot of people would love to focus on just natural consequences, but let's be very clear what is a natural consequence and what isn't a natural consequence. So someone said to me the other day, well, Nicholeen, you talk about artificial consequences a lot, like extra chores, but what about natural consequences? Like if a person doesn't put their socks away, then you take their socks away. I'm like, that's not a natural consequence. That's actually an artificial consequence. The natural consequence of not putting your socks away is that now you have a sock mess all over the floor. Or maybe when I'm looking for a particular sock, I don't know where it is because it didn't get put away. Those would be natural consequences. But if you take something away from somebody else, like their phone because they're on it too much, those are all synthetic consequences. So don't think that those things are natural. Natural consequences are great teachers, but most children do not acknowledge natural consequences very readily. So let's say a child doesn't do their dishes and they walk into the kitchen and the kitchen smells like old rotten food. They're going to say, ew, it stinks in here, and they'll probably walk out. They won't say, ew, it stinks in here, probably because I didn't do my dishes 2 nights ago, so maybe I should start doing my dishes right now and get all those old dishes done. No, they just notice that something smells bad and then walk away. That doesn't make them want to do their dishes necessarily at that time. It could take a long period of time for the dishes to finally get done. So what parents do is they use synthetic consequences to help teach the child quicker so that the child can learn cause and effect in a more expedited fashion so that they can have a better learning experience overall and get better at some of their troubling behaviors. Teaching cause and effect is vital. Natural and synthetic consequences can both be used. However, synthetic consequences are usually faster and can be used more immediately. Also, sometimes they're less harsh. Think about that. If you tell a child, don't run in the road, and if you run in the road, then I will get you out of the road and you will earn an extra chore. Let's say it's something like that because you're not accepting a no answer. Well, the natural consequence of running in the road is, what if you get hit by the car? That's a really painful natural consequence. So wouldn't it be better to remove them and tell them that they didn't accept a no answer and so now they've earned an extra chore? I think yes. So many times the synthetic consequences are actually more merciful. Now the trouble comes when some parents start using consequences as the payback. right? Maybe the parent doesn't want to be doing the correction moment in the first place, or they were bothered by something. So now they start formulating consequences just to cause pain on their child. Well, that's not good self-government on the part of the parent. In fact, it's emotionally manipulative. You shouldn't be using consequences to manipulate your child's behavior. Instead, it's simply just to teach them a lesson of cause and effect, which means they don't even have to hate their consequence. They don't have to feel any emotion toward their consequence at all. They just have to accept their consequence, which is why in our family, we oftentimes use extra chores. I'll be getting more to those negative consequences in just a moment so that you can see what works and what doesn't work. But first, let's talk about what makes a bad consequence and what makes a good consequence. Before we talk about what makes good and bad consequences and some of the consequences that I recommend, click the subscribe button now. This channel is full of information on creating an environment where you and your children can thrive in a self-governing environment, where you can be bonded together in unity and seek greater understanding from each other. So click on the subscribe button now to get more information in the future when you need it most. So what makes a bad consequence? If something is done to a child just to make a child feel a certain emotion, then that is a manipulative consequence, and I would consider that to be a bad consequence. If you are doing a consequence that lasts for many days, right, for a long period of time, such as you are not going to have friend privileges for the rest of the month or for the rest of your life, or whatever it is that people say, those are just threats, okay, and they're not great consequences. But also, if you are trying to pull your child away from something in that way for long periods of time, then that's not a good consequence either, because they can't do anything to accept it. Now, this is what makes a good consequence. A good consequence is made when a person gets the opportunity to accept it. If you want them to learn to evaluate themselves and learn self-government, then they need to be given the opportunity to accept a negative consequence. These 4 books each teach one of the 4 basic skills to children. And this one here, Big Win for Quinn, teaches the skill accepting consequences. When a person accepts a consequence, they can look at the person or situation, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay, or ask to disagree appropriately, do the consequence, and then check back and drop the subject. If your child is able to stay calm, say okay, or disagree appropriately with you, which is taught in this book here, then your child is actually getting the opportunity to accept a consequence. Now, if they push and then you fight and pull, then you are going to get in a power struggle, and they will ultimately end up having things happen to them, especially if you lose control. What needs to happen is you stay calm and they stay calm, hopefully, and if they're not calm, you still help them get to a place of calmness by using one of your teaching skills that you use as a parent. Now, in the Teaching Self-Government Parenting program, we teach the children every correction skill that we are ever going to use before we ever use it. So they know exactly what I'm going to say. In fact, they can say it back to me when we do role plays to practice. So when that happens, then we're not increasing their anxieties or frustration during the moment that you are saying what needs to be said to calm them down. They actually recognize it's up to them to choose the calmness right at that time. They can't power struggle their way out of it. They have to just pick it. That's one of the key things that makes a great consequence, is when the person recognizes it was their choice. They have to choose to accept the consequence. They have to choose to be calm and to overcome it and fix the problem. Everything comes back to their choice. But this doesn't mean that I burden them with lots of choices. Many parents will say, well, you can pick this or you can pick this, and they give the children the choices that they can pick ahead of time. And while that's not terrible, it's much better to help the child understand the steps of what they need to do and just say, these are the steps you need to do, otherwise we do a correction. These are the steps. Here's the step you're missing. Let's focus on this step. So when the parent gives the child the exact skill set they need to use, they don't need to try to get the child stuck in this place of decision of what's going to be better for me and not. It just points the child in the right direction. Now let's talk about some other bad negative consequences, such as timeout. Timeout timeout is used by a lot of people, but it's actually not a really great negative consequence because it teaches detachment from parents, which is not good. You go sit over there because you're not good enough to be with me right now. I'm not going to give you any of my love or attention right now. It's very emotionally manipulative to the child, and it really does increase their anxiety. Many small children will sit on timeout and beg and scream for hugs and caring because they feel like their parents don't care about them at that time. And if that's the case, then you know that that consequence has been manipulative. We do use a place in the Teaching Self-Government program for small children. We call it a calm down spot, and they are only there until they can be calm. And sometimes the parent even stays right there with them. I don't have time to go into how to use all of that consequence at this time because the calm down place isn't a consequence, it's a trigger spot. And what they do is they actually just get calm there, and then they get the opportunity to accept a consequence after. That's why they don't have to stay there for a certain period of time, like a lot of people prescribe to do when you use a timeout. I also do not like grounding people, those kinds of things. There could be a time for a large negative consequence, but that needs to be articulated ahead of time, what that would ever be if a person goes completely out of control or steps over a boundary that might be incredibly dangerous or needs something a little larger attached to it. So the biggest thing with teaching self-government is that you prepare ahead of time for what might come. And then you tell the children so they've been pre-taught and there's no surprises. The best consequences are very predictable and don't surprise the person. This decreases anxiety, gives them a greater opportunity to be able to accept their consequences and thereby master self-government. So how should we create good, simple consequences that work? Well, Samuel Smiles, who wrote the book called Character back in the 1800s, said that work is the antidote for a sick character. And I completely agree with Mr. Smiles on that. When you are working, there's this Georgic thing that happens that you start to forget yourself and how you feel, and you just start getting the job done. And that's a great thing. It helps open the mind to much more deeper thinking and helps the person be able to just relax a little bit. So extra chores are really powerful because not only do they improve character, but they serve somebody else, not just yourself, and they create an opportunity for quick repentance. I don't like consequences that follow a person around forever. Oh, you didn't make your bed, so now you don't get snacks for the entire day. Why would that be a thing? How about you didn't follow the instruction to make your bed, so you've earned an extra chore, so now we need to make the bed and do the extra chore, but once that's done, it's over. I forget about it, you forget about it. Isn't that what a merciful judge does? They forget about the transgression or the mistake when it right after it happened and allow the person the freedom to just repent from it and be done. So I love that. It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't get into the whole day and ruining the whole day. The family doesn't have to remember how bad that one person was when they hit that other person the whole day long. They can just let stuff go and give somebody the opportunity to change and progress. That's what makes a great negative consequence. So I use extra chores. Now for positive consequences, we use lots of things. We use like special time with mom and dad, high fives, praises. Sometimes there's money, there's snacks, all kinds of things that you could do for a positive consequence. And positive consequences teach just as well as negative consequences. So keep that in mind and don't forget to use them in motivation. But don't use them as bribery because motivation and bribery are two different things. So what if a child does something, really intense or bad or goes completely out of instructional control? Well, we have 3 other negative consequences in our family that we use for something called the rule of 3 when someone goes completely out of control, meaning they will not respect mom and dad. They will not listen. They are having a tantrum or something like that, whether they're a teenager or a toddler. Tantrums happen. We know this. I know this especially because of all the years of doing treatment foster care for troubled teens. I saw a lot of tantrums from older children. Anyway, so what do? We have 3 things. One of them is a major maintenance, which is a larger job, still the same concept of the work, which is great. And then the second one is 2 problem-solving exercises called SOTAs. These are written exercises that actually are productive for the person because they help develop the prefrontal cortex and help them solve their problem better in the future. And then the third negative consequence is kind of the biggest one that they could ever have, and this is a loss of privileges for 24 hours. And what that means is that the person does not have friend time snacks, TV time, phone, computer. They don't get to just sit around the house and do whatever they want or play with siblings. For 24 hours, they get the recommended hours of sleep, 3 meals a day, and the rest of the time they are doing extra chores. I mean, if it's a school day, they're going to go to school if they're in control. But then when they get home, they are going to be doing extra chores the whole rest of the time. They will practice following instructions, because usually they got to that place because they would not choose to follow instructions. Now, obviously, there are certain ages that we're going to modify some of these consequences for, because the loss of privileges for 24 hours might be a little bit too intense for a 6 or 7-year-old. However, a 6 or 7-year-old is ready for using the words from the rule of 3. So I do have a modified rule of 3, and you can find that on my Teaching Self-Government support group. If you've enjoyed learning about these simple but good consequences that you can use in your family, you're probably going to want to learn more about the skills of self-government. There is a video that I recommend watching next, and it is called The Not So Known Secret for Parenting Success, and it talks about a lot of the skills and principles for correcting your children and learning self-government. It's a full-length class. I hope you enjoy it. Click on the link to that class now.